Today, we will be talking about 4 cases of missing persons from the late 1970s. For decades, these 4 cases remained unanswered, lives taken, families left waiting, and no suspects in sight. But in 2025, one breakthrough after another finally exposed the truth, all thanks to the power of DNA. Today, detectives don't need to rely on shaky eyewitness testimony and hope that the culprit of a vicious crime they're investigating is on the combined DNA index system. New advancements in forensic and DNA technology have led to the solving of many of the most cruel and infamous crimes in our society, and we will likely see even more justice in the coming years. Join us for today's episode as we examine 4 decades-old cold cases that were finally solved in 2025. On March 21, 1977, a little after 7:30 a.m., police in Honolulu, Hawaii were called to McKinley High School after the body of a student was found in one of the buildings. 16-year-old Dawn Mamahara was discovered lying on her back, partially clothed with an orange cloth wrapped tightly around her neck. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. Horrifically, Dawn's sister turned up for school that day unaware that her sister's body had been recovered. She was subsequently called to the principal's office and informed, and shortly afterward, she made her way to the school's band room where her classmates attempted to comfort her. Grant Okamura, the band teacher, told The Independent, "The other students were trying to console her. At that point, I couldn't have band. How do you have a class? She just sat there crying." Dawn was last seen the previous day when she received a call from an unknown male and later told her mother that she was heading to the local shopping center to meet friends. She never came home that night. In the days after her death, the police released sketches of a person of interest, as well as an associate vehicle, which they had received reports of from eyewitnesses. The car was described as a 1974 or 75 Pontiac Lehman's, which was seen by a witness and his girlfriend as they drove through the school campus the night before her body was found. A man was near the car on a section of grass close to the school's English building. The man and the vehicle were never identified, however, and the case grew cold. Over the next few years, Dawn's murder saw very little movement. It wasn't until 2019 that a cold case team requested that a forensic biology unit take a look at some of the items still in evidence, including Dawn's underwear. The following year, the forensic experts were able to create a DNA profile, and in 2023, they received information about 2 brothers who had been interviewed back in 1977, just days after the body was found. Gideon Castro, who'd graduated from the school the year prior, was approached by investigators. He explained that he'd met Dawn at a school dance in 1976 and last saw her in February 1977 when he was at a carnival. The pair had spoken for about 15 minutes, and he had mentioned being in the U.S. Army Reserve. His brother William met Dawn through Castro. After receiving further information about the brothers in 2023, detectives journeyed to Chicago, where Castro's brother was living, and obtained DNA from one of his adult children. Forensic testing found it not to be a match to that found at the crime scene. So investigators turned to one of Castro's children, whose DNA revealed a link. After taking a swab from Castro himself, they found a concrete match. He was subsequently arrested for second-degree murder in January of 2025 at the nursing home where he lived in Mill Creek, south of Salt Lake City, Utah. At the time of recording, there have been no new updates in the case. As of late January, Castro was awaiting extradition to Honolulu. Beverly Wevel, 30-year-old Beverly Wevel from Canton Township, Michigan, dropped her son off at school on the morning of September 18, 1989. According to investigators, she had taken a nap in her vehicle afterwards when she was abducted from the car, sexually assaulted, and shot to death. Some reports state that her legs had been run over by at least one vehicle. Her body was discovered on the side of the road, off Gottfredson Road in Washington County. Investigators soon began looking into the case. They established that Beverly had been shot with a .45 caliber pistol, and in the following hours, they tracked down her vehicle. Its engine was still running, the driver's side door was open, and her belongings remained inside, including a handbag. Detectives also determined that the murder and assault had occurred in about an hour, as Beverly's son was dropped off at 8:30 a.m., while the police were called to the scene at around 9:40. Beverly's son, Dale Swanson, was 13 when his mother was killed. Reflecting on that time in his mother's life, he stated, "There was stuff going on though. She was divorcing my dad at the time, and my grandfather wouldn't let her bring her new boyfriend into the house, so she would stay out in the car, but she wasn't living in the car." While the police collected DNA evidence and a rape kit was administered, they had very little to work with at the time, as a match could only be made if the perpetrator's DNA profile was already in the system, and it wasn't. Furthermore, witness reports were few and far between. One witness claimed that they'd heard a gunshot and seen a blue vehicle similar to a Chrysler New Yorker with a white top speeding from the scene, but this account went nowhere. For decades, Beverly's case lay dormant. In 2022, the Washington County Sheriff's Office re-examined the case, hoping that fresh eyes and new forensic techniques would bring closure to a 32-year-old tragedy.
While the case had gone bone-chillingly cold, at a standstill for decades, for Dale Swanson, the son of 31-year-old Beverly Ann Wyville.
That day has been in my head since that day, as vivid as if it were yesterday.
That day over 35 years ago, September 18th, 1989, when Washtenaw County deputies called to the area of Ford and Gottfriedson in Superior Township. The body of a woman, later identified as Wyville, found lying on the side of the road, with a .45 caliber, her legs run over. A witness telling police back then they heard a gunshot, spotting a car similar to a blue Chrysler New Yorker with a white top, speeding away from where she was discovered. Her car later found here at Griffin Park in Canton, at Cherry Hill and Sheldon, still running. And the driver door wide open, her purse inside. Reports first coming out that she had been living in there.
There was stuff going on, though. She was divorcing my stepdad at the time. And my grandma wouldn't let her bring her new boyfriend in the house, so she would stay out in the car with her, but she wasn't living in her car.
Wyville police believe dropping her son off at the bus stop just an hour before she'd been abducted, raped, and killed. Dale Swanson, only 13 years old back then, losing his mom.
The authorities worked with Michigan State Police and ultimately sent their forensic evidence to Orem Inc., a corporation specializing in forensic genetic genealogy. In January of 2024, forensic experts working with Ofram began building a complete DNA profile of the suspect and used it to carry out genealogy research, which narrowed down the pool of suspects for investigators. From their pool of suspects, authorities eventually honed in on 69-year-old Buster Robbins from Almont, Michigan.
Buster Robbins is accused of sexually assaulting and murdering a Washtenaw County mother 36 years ago. Last year, DNA from the rape kit was tested using genealogy testing. It led investigators to Robbins. In court last month, a judge ruled he would not go to trial for the woman's murder, but he would stay in jail. Prosecutors plan to appeal the ruling. Today, we expect to learn if Robbins is facing other charges in other cases or will potentially get bond. We are planning to be in the courtroom.
They subsequently carried out several days of surveillance across several weeks, staking out the home that he shared with his wife. On September 24, 2024, they were able to gather several items, including used straws, which were sent for DNA comparison. A match was soon confirmed, and Robbins was arrested. His wife later told authorities that in 1989 he drove a vehicle that matched the one reported by the witness. They also found a .45 caliber magazine inside his home while executing a search warrant. Robbins was charged with felony murder. His attorney stated during a discussion about bail that he was a father of 4, had both grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and that he had no criminal history. Beverly's son, Dale, observed that it hurt the most, thinking that 35 years ago he did this, and then carried on with his life like nothing happened. A judge ultimately ruled that Robbins would be held without bail. The case is ongoing. On the morning of March 8, 1998, police in Toronto were called to a car park on Carlton Street near Jarvis Street following reports that a body had been found. The victim was found to be 4 months pregnant and had been strangled to death. She was soon established as being 24-year-old Donna Ogliffe, who was originally from the Philippines but was a resident of British Columbia at the time of her death. She had only been in Toronto for 5 weeks before she was killed. Investigators learned shortly thereafter that she was a mother of one already and that she made her living by engaging in sex work. Despite being able to collect DNA from the crime scene, Donna's case remained unsolved for over 2 decades. In 2019, a Toronto cold case team released a YouTube video appealing for information, and 2 years later, the case was featured on a Toronto police podcast which highlights unsolved crimes. The head of the cold case unit, Detective Sergeant Steve Smith, stated, "This was a horrendous crime. She was vulnerable, working on the streets to make money, but we never forgot Donna. We never forget anyone." Despite their efforts to garner new leads, authorities remained clueless as to the identity of Donna's killer. In 2022, investigators sent the forensic evidence in Donna's case to Inc., as they did with the case of Beverly. Forensic experts built a DNA profile of the suspect and a genealogy search was conducted. The police, now armed with the names of potential suspects, began working to narrow down their list. On February 6, 2025, 50-year-old Ronald Ackerman of Gander, Newfoundland, was arrested at Toronto Pearson Airport, having returned from a trip to Alberta, where he worked in the oil fields. He was subsequently charged with first-degree murder. Detective Sergeant Smith, who announced the arrest the following day, stated that police believed Ackerman, who was a 24-year-old truck driver in 1998, had been a client of Donna's on the night of her death. They stated that at this time, they were not sure if it was a one-off or if he saw Donna on a regular basis. Notably, investigators also stated that Ackerman was known to them, but that his name had never surfaced during their investigation into Donna's death. Another unnamed law enforcement source told the Toronto Sun that when greeted by the police, Ackerman seemed surprised. They added, "He was like, 'Are you sure?' and 'Oh my goodness.' In his mind, we had it all wrong." Smith also announced that they would be looking into Ackerman's movements over the last 25 years to establish whether or not he had any links to other crimes, stating, "We need to find out what he's been doing over the past 25 years and make sure there are no other victims, whether sexually motivated or homicides, that he could be involved in." In early February, Ackerman was still in custody. There have been no updates since, but the case, like others mentioned here, is ongoing. Anyone with relevant information about Ackerman can call Crime Stoppers anonymously at 416-284-77 or contact Toronto Police at 416-874-00. Marianne Daniels. On February 1, 1989, Marianne Daniels was discovered dead in her home in the 2100 block of Hoyt Avenue in Everett, Washington. Mary was a 33-year-old developmentally disabled woman who was residing in a transitional living facility at the time of her death. Her brother Terry described her as someone who was trusting, carefree, and always believed the good in people. It was quickly established that Mary had been murdered, strangled to death with a ligature made from her bra, purse strap, and an electrical cord. Her body had been discovered by the property manager who had gone to collect her rent and discovered that the door was ajar. He initially believed she was just asleep after seeing the lower portion of her legs on her bed, and so he let himself out. But the following day, he returned to find that she hadn't moved. This time, he saw the ligature around her neck and subsequently called the police. Investigators noticed while examining the scene that a TV guide was opened on the listing for January 28th and speculated that, given the condition of her body, she had likely died that night. In the days that followed, authorities discovered a cut electrical cord and 2 hairs that did not appear to be Mary's. Collecting the pieces as evidence, they also canvassed the area and, upon speaking with friends, discovered that Mary had a sexual relationship with a man while she was living in a motel, but more recently had discussed a relationship she had with a neighbor she called Joe. Despite this information, the most suspicious behaving person in the case was the property manager, who quickly became belligerent. He refused to give his date of birth to the police and was soon found to have provided a false name. He was arrested on a felony warrant and returned to Oregon, where he was wanted for another crime. Police eventually tracked down the man Mary had been seeing while staying at the motel. And though police found some of his statements to be odd, and at least a bit concerning, he had an alibi for the night of the murder. For years, investigators believed that one of these men was likely responsible for the crime, but they never had the evidence to prove it. And both eventually died in 2011. The DNA of both men was compared to that found on Mary's body, and both were ruled out. A third person of interest, who has not been named, was also ruled out at this time. For decades, the case collected dust. It wasn't until 2021 that Orem Inc. managed to acquire a DNA profile from the hairs found at the crime scene. The profile was then uploaded to G-Match, and in 2022, Joseph Andrew Jack was identified. Jack was one of Mary's neighbors at the time of her death, and had been interviewed, but was not considered a person of interest. When speaking with police in 1989, he stated that he'd gone to work, returned home, had a shower, and went out to dinner alone before moving on to a bar where he stayed until closing. When questioned about his relationship with Mary, he claimed he had no sort of relationship with her beyond that of casual neighbors. Notably, Jack was only spoken to once by investigators between the time of Mary's death and his arrest in 2025, and he had almost no other criminal history except for a misdemeanor conviction for reckless driving in 1992. By the time the link was made between the two, Jack was living in Las Vegas. Everett police contacted authorities in the area to help them obtain a DNA sample, and a discarded beer bottle was collected from a restaurant he was eating at before it was shipped to the Everett PD. The DNA from the bottle matched that of Mary's crime scene. 61-year-old Jack was arrested in Las Vegas in late January 2025 and placed in Clark County Jail. He is to be extradited back to Washington, where prosecutors have requested that he be held in lieu of a $2 million bail. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment below with your own thoughts and speculations, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.